real sense of ever making any real change on the Horn. Is that what we're saying here? I mean, now you talk about Kenya. What about the Kenyan election? You know, Kenya, I think, has a reputation of being one of the four most states in East Africa that has done things in terms of democracy and et cetera, et cetera. But we see some of the problems in Kenya now that tend to indicate that somebody said that if a regime has been in power for 8, 10, 12, 15 years, then there's no prospect of having any kind of democracy. Speak to that. I mean, how is that? And I mean, it's so sad that it's humorous in a real sense.
That's correct. That's correct. Well, I think in a way Kenya might be an exception to a lot of the countries in the Horn. Kenya has done well in terms of stability, political stability, and that has worked in its favor insofar as economy is concerned. You know, several international organizations, the UN and all that, have headquarters in Kenya. You know, Nairobi is one of the most bustling cities in Africa and the world, really. You know, so in a way, they've done well by having regular elections, unlike their neighbors and others. You know, since Kenya became a republic, you know, in '64, elections have been held on time constantly, even though, you know, people will say 90% of it have been rigged. Okay. You know, but there's been elections. There's a functioning parliament that has been, you know, that has been in operation since independence. There's never been a coup in Kenya, even though one was attempted in 1982 by Air Force officers, which was quickly crushed. Now you come to the last election, and people were surprised at the reaction, you know, of the electorate after the elections were announced. You know, people started burning down houses and demonstrating. There's no surprise to what happened because it's been in the making for decades. In 1964, when Kenya became in a republic, there were two parties. You know, the Kenya African Democratic Union, based in the coastal, you know, cities of the country, and also the Kenya African Nationalist Union. You know, so what happened? The difference between the two was that the KADU, the Kenya African Democratic Union, was supported by most of the minority ethnic groups in Kenya because they wanted federalism instead of a central authority because of their ethnic status, so that they could have autonomy in the areas. The Kenya African Nationalist Union, headed by Jomo Kenyatta, said, no, we want, you know, a central authority government, and was supported by a majority of the Kikuyus and Luos and some others. So the KANU has been in power since then. And what happened was that through KANU, the Kikuyu ethnic group, which is about 20% of the population, has had a disproportionate representation, you know, in the government and the economy, etc., to the resentment of the other ethnic groups, particularly the Luo ethnic group. Okay. In Kenya, 5 ethnic groups predominate: the Kikuyu, the Luo, the Kalenjin, the Lua, and the Kamba. These 5 ethnic groups make up 70% of the population, with the Kikuyu about 20%, the Luo about 15%, and the Kalenjin about 10%. The last president before this was a Kalenjin, you know, Daniel Arap Moi, who stayed in power for almost 20 years. The current president, Mwai Kibaki, is Kikuyu. Okay. You see, for long, the Kikuyu political class and the Luo political class have been struggling for power. The first vice president under Kenyatta was Ojinga Odinga, the father of the current, you know, the man who supposedly won this, Raila Odinga. He was implicated in that 1982 coup. His father fell out with Kenyatta over ideology, and his father was jailed. So he is Luo. So there has been a struggle for power between the Luo political establishment and the Kikuyu.
And Dr. Madu, as we forced to call this to an end, but it all boils down to the fact that the people in Africa and on the Horn of Africa are suffering primarily through the inability of the leaders to make some decisions in reference to how they wish to run their governments and et cetera. And so I want to thank you for bringing that information by to us, Dr. Madu, and I think we all have a better understanding in terms of what is going on the Horn. And I think the United States within the framework of the kind of information that you're given here, can also make better choices in terms of who it wishes to support in these particular areas.
Absolutely.
And certainly I want to thank you for bringing us that information. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.